In 2004, Poland was dismissed as Europe's economic underdog, unemployment near 20%, income at half the EU average, and its factories relics of the Soviet past. But 2 decades later, the impossible happened. Foreign money poured in, highways and factories rose almost overnight, and Poland began to overtake the giants of the continent. Today, economists call it Europe's new economic engine, and say it is challenging Germany itself. How did a nation once written off pull off this historic turnaround? What does it mean for the future of Europe? Poland's entry into the European Union in May 2004 landed with the weight of desperation, not celebration. The country's jobless rate hovered at 20%, 1 in 5 adults out of work, the highest in the bloc. Factories that once churned under Soviet command now stood half empty, their machinery decades out of date. Across the countryside, crumbling roads and unreliable railways cut off entire regions from the economic lifeblood of Western Europe. For millions, the only way forward meant leaving. By 2006, the exodus of young Poles to London, Dublin and Berlin had become a national wound. The numbers told a bleak story. GDP per capita was stuck at just half the European Union average, barely €5,400 a year. Analysts in Brussels and Frankfurt saw little hope for a quick turnaround. Most predicted that Poland would need half a century, if not longer, to catch up to Western living standards. Foreign investors circled, but only for the bargain: cheap labour, low taxes and little else. The country's reputation as a low-cost outpost rather than a partner was cemented in boardrooms from Paris to Munich. Inside Poland, the sense of being left behind was everywhere. Cities like Lodz and Katowice, once industrial powerhouses, faced waves of layoffs and shuttered plants. Rural areas suffered from neglect, with infrastructure no better than in the late communist era. The European Union's single market beckoned, but Polish firms lacked the capital and technology to compete. Even the most optimistic voices in Warsaw warned of a long, grinding road to prosperity. Yet beneath the gloom, the seeds of change were quietly being sown. Exports had already started to climb, with trade to the European Union growing 5-fold since the early 1990s. But the gap was immense. In 2004, Poland's share of European Union GDP was a mere 1.5%. The country's leaders faced a daunting question. Could they turn European membership into more than just hope? Could they make it the engine for a leap that seemed impossible? Every indicator, every forecast said the odds were stacked against them, but the story of what happened next would defeat every expectation. Private capital poured into Poland at a speed and scale no one predicted. In the 2 decades after joining the EU, foreign direct investment surged past $300 billion, almost half of all foreign direct investment that reached the 8 new member states that joined in 2004. Global manufacturers, once dismissive, began redrawing their maps. Volkswagen's decision to expand in Poznan stands out. At the edge of the city, what started as a modest utility vehicle plant in the 1990s grew into a sprawling complex. By 2016, Volkswagen opened a new crafter van factory in nearby Września, an €800 million investment, the largest in Western Poland that decade. Incentives from Poland's government, property tax breaks, and a workforce earning half German wages tipped the scales. Poznan became Volkswagen's largest van site, employing over 10,000 people and drawing in a web of suppliers, logistics firms, and tech startups. The pattern repeated across the country. Fiat in Tychy, LG in Wrocław, factories multiplied, and so did research centres, regional headquarters and service hubs. It was not just about cheap labour anymore. Poland's universities churned out engineers and technicians, while EU membership meant every product could move freely to 450 million consumers. Companies found what they could not get elsewhere: skilled hands, competitive costs, and a direct pipeline into Europe's single market. But capital alone does not build an economy. The real game changer was the flood of EU cohesion and structural funds. Between 2004 and 2023, Poland received more than €250 billion in EU development money. At the height of absorption, these funds covered up to 40% of all public investment. The impact was immediate and visible. Over 2,000 kilometers of new highways connected Poland's cities to Berlin, Prague, and the Baltic ports. The A2 motorway slashed travel time between Warsaw and Berlin from 6 hours to under 3. High-speed rail lines and modernized airports unlocked regions that had been economic dead zones for decades. Infrastructure that took Western Europe half a century to build appeared in Poland in less than 15 years. The roads, rails, and digital networks did not just move goods, they pulled in more investment, spurred local business, and made Poland the logistics heart of the continent. For the first time, Polish firms could compete on equal footing, and global giants saw Poland as a launchpad, not just a workshop. The avalanche of capital and concrete turned vulnerability into momentum, setting the stage for a labour market that would soon flip from crisis to strength. Anna left Poland in 2005, joining the wave of young professionals who chased better prospects in Berlin and London. Back then, her degree in engineering meant little at home, where job offers were scarce and paychecks barely covered rent. But by 2022, Anna was on a flight back to Warsaw, lured by an offer to head a research team at a global tech giant. She was not alone. The job market Anna returned to was unrecognisable from the one she had left behind. Unemployment had collapsed from 20% to just 3%, and companies were raising wages by as much as 8% a year just to keep up with demand. For the first time in decades, Poland's labour market was so tight that employers posted job ads in Ukrainian, Bengali and Tagalog. Factories in Silesia and Wrocław started recruiting from as far away as Bangladesh and the Philippines. The old story, Poles leaving for Western Europe, had flipped. By 2023, official statistics showed more Poles returning home than leaving, a reversal that would have seemed impossible just a decade earlier. Anna's new salary matched what she earned in Germany, but the real draw was different. A booming city, family close by, and a sense that Poland was finally catching up. She joined a growing crowd of returnees, including engineers, programmers, and managers who brought home skills, savings, and fresh ambitions. Their return fueled a surge in innovation and productivity, pushing Poland's economy further up the value chain. The country that once exported its best and brightest was now fighting to keep them, and winning. Krzysztof clocks in before dawn at the Gdansk shipyard, but his job today looks nothing like the assembly lines of his youth. 2 decades ago, he bolted parts onto imported Fiat chassis for a fraction of German wages. Now he oversees the final integration of armoured hulls bound for NATO, using skills honed in Poland's new technical institutes. His pay is still 40% lower than what a German engineer might earn, but the difference is shrinking fast. For global manufacturers, that gap is decisive. Across Poland, this wage advantage has redrawn the industrial map. German giants like Bosch and Siemens have shifted entire production lines east. In Lodz and Siedlce, factories once destined for closure now turn out advanced appliances and rail cars for export across Europe. For every euro saved on labour, companies also benefit from Poland's lower energy bills. While Germany shuttered its last nuclear plant in 2023 and watched electricity prices surge, Poland signed a deal worth $30 billion to build its first nuclear reactors, aiming for 3 gigawatts online by 2033 and as much as 9 gigawatts by 2040. This nuclear energy bet promises stable, affordable power for heavy industry, an offer Germany can no longer match. The real test came during the 2008 financial crisis. As the rest of the EU slipped into recession, Poland's economy grew by 1.6%. Analysts called it the Green Island, the only spot of growth on a continent in the red. By 2024, Polish income had reached 80% of the EU average, a leap that took Western Europe half a century. The impossible catch-up was no longer theory. It was happening in real time on factory floors and balance sheets. Germany's grip on Europe's industrial crown has loosened, and Poland's new engine is running at full speed. Right now, factories and boardrooms across Europe are recalculating. As Poland's economy outpaces old giants, the continent's balance of power quietly shifts east. The next chapter isn't about catching up, it is about Who leads? The new engine is running and it won't idle for anyone. What do you think?